Well, good morning and welcome to the Naples Money Managers News You Can Use. I actually can get that out of my mouth, okay?
Took you a second.
I know, it takes me a second. As you know, this is Marcus Bickle and I'm Dawn Litchfield Brown.
Hello, everyone.
Good to talk with you today. 9/11, kind of a somber day today for so many reasons.
Yeah.
25 years ago, though.
That is pretty wild.
That's 25 years ago. A whole generation that has no idea.
Yeah, we have our young man who just started with us, Matt Marcello, who you may have met during one of our earlier videos. He was a baby in his mother's arms when the towers were struck. He was telling me the story that he has obviously no recollection of, but his mom tells the story that she was holding him.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yeah, I just graduated from high school and I was sleeping in. And my mom came into the room and she's like, something hit the towers. And I'm like, Mom, what are you talking about?
Right?
I'm like, Mom, you sound crazy.
It was so unbelievable. I was in Vermont, actually, and I was on the phone with a CPA, and he had his TV on, and he said, you need to put your TV on. And I was like, what? Same kind of thing. What are you talking about?
Yep.
They hit the towers. And
it was an accident.
Wow.
And then you saw the second plane hit and you knew.
So, but it
really
must be
wasn't.
how people feel when they were in the war, World War or Vietnam or whatever,
Pearl Harbor.
when nobody remembers any of that. And of course, eventually there will be only what's written to remember.
And even then, that's suspect, folk. Not to digress, but we only know what we know because of what was written down,
Right.
and it's only because of that one person who did it. So, it is. It must be hard to as time moves forward. And events that you lived through became history.
Right.
Like we have a client who lived through the Second World War. She was a little girl when the Luftwaffe raided London during the London Blitz, and she remembers bombs like hitting the apartment building next to her. And for me, I'm a big history nut, so hearing about that, that's something I've.
And all the U-boats she talks
Oh,
about.
yeah, exactly.
She talks about the U-boats and how they got bombed and all the kids were on the U-boats. Anyway,
It's crazy
let's move on to something maybe a little lighter today. And I'm going to talk about Social Security and veterans and a few things like that, and then we'll digress into the markets, which I think is important. But there's a couple things I want to talk about. We've talked about this before. This is all these advertisements about lock your mortgage and that people are going to steal your deed or lock your deed. I mean, not your mortgage. Who cares if they take your mortgage? Lock your deed. All these services are really monitoring services. That's what you're getting, is just monitoring.
Kind of like LifeLock, folks.
It is exactly like LifeLock. So, I mean, the easiest thing to do is once in a while just check and see if your deed is still in your name. The only way they could get it out of your name, I believe, is they would have to get a document, forge your signatures, get someone to forge a notary, and bring it in. But I would like to almost try it. If I was an investigative reporter, I would be doing this.
And even then, folks, what Dawn just said, I think, yeah, they could absolutely do those, the multiple steps of fraud to gain your deed. But even then, once the fraud was uncovered, I'm pretty sure the deed would revert to you.
Well, yeah, but by that time they may have sold your house.
That's true. But even then, it's interesting, folk. But I had a question about the monitoring services. Do you know if those monitoring services include any kind of clause for recovery? Because LifeLock historically would offer like $1 million towards recovering your identity.
Yeah,
now, whether or not that was ever actually a thing, and you could actually lean upon that during identity theft, but that was one of their big, we're watching, but there is some recovery. Now, I think in practice, that probably never happened.
Yeah, I can tell you I don't know. Yeah. I really don't know.
It's an interesting question.
To me, this is some investigative reporter kind of stuff that should be done. But
you'd be a good investigative reporter.
Oh, yeah. As they say, there's somebody out there who's probably listening. She's like a dog with a bone, Don't try to take it away from me until I get it all finished.
It's true.
Anyway, the Social Security, there's like the new bill. We all know about the new beautiful bill that's not passed. It's like, 700 and how many pages?
Yeah, it's enormous.
It's a big bill. But there's a lot of things in it. So we had an experience with a client, and he's a veteran, and he was telling us that his property taxes, he doesn't have to pay property taxes on his residence.
Okay.
And I thought, wow. He said, or his Social Security under the new bill. So of course that made us start to check into those things. The property tax part is correct, but it's because he's a disabled veteran. And I think that is key. But if you're a disabled veteran and you don't know this, maybe this will save you thousands of dollars every year on your property taxes. So that's a bit of good news you can use.
But there was a specific clause to what made a veteran disabled, right? Like it had to be a disability earned during service.
Well, no. So if you had an injury of 10% or more, I think that's what it is. Let me just really check
that's
here.
What you said, 10%.
Yeah, 10% or more. Here it says, if you have a related combat disability of 10% or more, you're entitled to a property tax reduction. Not entirely, but of $5,000.
And combat-related disabilities are fairly broad, folks. Like if you had served within the last several decades in any of these various conflicts we've been in, that doesn't necessarily mean like a bullet wound. That could mean you were exposed to, in Vietnam, like Agent Orange, or in the Desert Storm, perhaps depleted uranium. Those things were things that our troops were exposed to and are forms of disability that you may be able to lean on.
Yeah, so there's just always things that we don't know about that are out there that can maybe save somebody a little bit of money.
Exactly.
And we started to talk about the Social Security issue, where they're talking about possibly, it's in the bill, eliminating that tax and or giving seniors over 65 a $6,000 credit against their taxable income. So that could be meaningful, but those are just, these are all just in the bill. I mean, nothing means anything
until it's passed.
Right.
People promise a lot, and then that's not to digress, Don, but one thing I would caution everyone who is listening to the news, basically any news organization has a vested interest in kind of placing a sort of a partisan spin on thing, depending on which side of the aisle they're on. And most of the time you will hear on these major news organizations them talking about a bill as if it is passed. Or even maybe passed in only one chamber of Congress. Perhaps it's passed the House. Well, that doesn't mean a hill of beans until it passed the Senate. Right. And then it's got to be signed by the president, folks. So there's multiple steps here for something to become reality. So even though a senator may introduce a bill...
So cool the panic.
Exactly. They may be able to introduce a bill to do something that is very meaningful to you, but our government is bureaucratic and labyrinthine. Right. So that bill may never come to fruition. There are dozens of bills that go through the House and the Senate.
I can also say cool the elation.
Yeah, absolutely.
It depends how you feel, but we can say that. And Social Security, I always find this kind of interesting because people don't realize Medicare did not exist till 1965. That's not that long ago. 1965, and it was President Johnson who put that in place.
Well, and it's lifetimes.
Still the single biggest entitlement that is a very difficult problem to solve because you don't know how long people are going to be sick. You don't know how many people are going to be sick. There's too many unknowns. And
to that, it's also it's a cash cow for special interests. Most of these large insurance and pharmaceutical companies have lobbied for decades to make sure that Medicaid cannot negotiate prices with them, things like that. The reason why it's such a huge entitlement is because the system is broken. Fundamentally, we're being robbed by these pharmaceutical companies.
The system is definitely broken. So Medicare is an issue.
Yes.
But then now Social Security, do you know when it was first introduced?
Was it 1983?
No, not Social Security.
We're talking about the taxation.
Yeah. No, 35. 1935. Yep, that's when it was first started. The benefits actually began in 1940. I only remember this so well because my mother was born in 34 and she used to tell me about it. But it's kind of, and that was under Roosevelt.
Oh, that makes sense.
That was under Roosevelt.
Old Teddy.
And it didn't start to be taxable. This is kind of a surprise until under Reagan. And that was 1980, what did I say here? 1984. It was Clinton is the one who increased it in 1993, the taxable part of Social Security. So it's kind of interesting how this is all played out and whether it will continue to be taxable or not. But I find it interesting how it all played out. And remember, Social Security although everybody talks about how dangerous it is that it could go broke, we do have more workers. For a while, the workers to support the Social Security people was going down, 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 and the Social Security is going up, up, up. And that, of course, the baby boomers are retiring.
Yeah, they're a very large generation.
But they're also dying.
Right.
And I think we have more and more workers now.
Yeah, what Don is specifically talking about is that the baby boomer was such a large generation, enormous. They were, I think, one of the largest age cohorts we've had in a while. Generation X, the forgotten generation, was very small, and
right.
Millennials bigger.
Well, it is bigger, yeah.
But not the same as the boomers. So that was a big concern about the solvency
right. And while I could go through the solvency of Social Security, we won't have enough time because we only have about a couple of minutes left, and you need to talk a little bit about the markets and the portfolios.
The markets. So real quick, just to kind of go through it, we've had a bunch of numbers based on inflation, jobs numbers. And we're starting to see a wider picture about the shakiness of the economy. We've, Fed Chair Powell talked to that a little bit about at Jackson Hole recently when he announced the rate cuts that we're supposedly getting this year. We'll know Tuesday, I believe, they're meeting, and we should see our first rate cut then. Most people are anticipating a quarter point.
Could get to half.
It could get to half. Half will be really good for the market, but I will caution you folks that if we get a half-point cut, that means we are in dire straits as an economy. That means the Fed is using a pretty heavy hand to try to balance something that they are worried about.